Gar Borras' Rewind, episode 3. How are you doing, Gar Borras?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm over here at Knott's Berry Farm, just chilling, watching everybody, having a really good time.
Where exactly are you in the park? What part would you say? Like,
I'm where the shopping, the shops are.
uh,
There's a little area right over here with some tables and some
yeah.
chairs, so right across from Starbucks. And so it's a nice vibe.
Well, I'm glad you got, even on a cloudy day like today, it's a cool vibe. You're right. And Gar, we should let the people know that already the episode is getting off to kind of a rocky start. We're having some technical issues, but I have a great feeling, my friend, by the end of the episode, like we always do, you know what? That was another great show in the can. But I think a great place to start off with is the latest episode, which was on Welcome Back, Kotter. Let's talk about that show and what did you enjoy about doing that episode?
Well, for me, it's always about the reminiscing that, it's just, you know, I just, that's the thing about doing the time machine I just like looking back and revisiting, things, that were, prevalent things in my past and, way back in the 70s. you know, um, that was a really popular TV show, and of course, there's a lot of things that spawned out of the show that are kind of like those things that you can't really predict, like Gabe Kaplan becoming a poker player.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah,
when you're watching the show, the last thing you're thinking about is, you're thinking about Gabe Kaplan. He's a funny comedian, the whole, thing, but you never think about him taking a turn in his life like that and becoming a poker player and becoming very involved in poker.
yeah. And the other thing, Gar, is that oh, excuse me for a minute, Gar. Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. Other thing, Gar, is that the theme song, like a lot of those classic TV shows, was a very huge part of what we're doing, of what those shows were. And even all these years later, that's one of the things I remember, even in doing the last week's episode, was what a great theme song. I mean, we talked about the great John Sebastian, and he was the one that came up with the theme song. Welcome back. Well, every time I see an episode, I just start singing the song, and it's one of those things that is so important to any great TV show that we even did an episode of the Time Machine on all our favorite TV uh, theme songs. And sometimes, we do these shows, and like I think it was episode where we were talking about the episode on the Flintstones, which was like episode 6 or something like that. We've done a total of 50 shows now, and we're like, I was telling you, Gar, I remember, and you said the same thing. I remember watching the Flintstones as a kid, and singing the song was a big part of that.
Well, and when we were doing the Welcome Back Kotter, it was we were touching on the popularity of John Sebastian, because at that time, and as time has gone by, most people really don't even know anything about John Sebastian or anything about his career, or
If they do,
that
they've
that
heard the
whole thing.
name.
But yeah,
They say,
well, yeah, the name, but it's all a faded memory now about all of his accomplishments. That he These are all accomplishments that he achieved before he ever even did the the theme for this show. He was a highly regarded and very popular musician, and when we were doing the episode, you touched on the fact that he performed at Woodstock.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows about Janis Joplin
Yeah.
performing at Woodstock, and Carlos Santana and Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
and all of these legendary performances at Woodstock, the Who, you know, but nobody remembers John Sebastian performing at Woodstock.
And you know,
That's how big he was. He performed at Woodstock.
and he performed at Woodstock, not with his previous band, The Love and Spoonful, but as a solo artist. And the funny thing, Gar, as we sit here, I think to many people, as we sit here and talk, John Sebastian is very much alive. You don't hear about him too much these days. I think he's like in his late 70s. I don't know how much he performs, but when people say the name Sebastian, oh yeah, he's a guy that did Welcome Back Kotter, as if that's the only thing he ever did. That's people have that forever image of him, you know, when he was young with the blonde hair, strumming that guitar, looking really young, and he's kind of forever young because of that.
Well, and that's that, you know, that touches on something that's you know, really prevalent now, you know, because of the internet, and how all of this has changed everything. You know, it's even had like social impacts. And you know, what I'm bringing up is, you know, from what you were just saying, is the fact that you know, when famous artists became famous, you know, at very young stages in their life, and you know, it's always for a certain amount of time period that they're famous,
Yeah,
you know, and then, you know, their fame fades, and then many years later, you know, people always bring up, you know, well, I wonder where so and so is now, or I wonder
yeah,
what so and so, you know, looks like now. And because that particular person has been out of the spotlight for such a long time, that now all of a sudden they appear, and then you know, all of these pictures, all of these people that only remember that artist when they were young, go through shock
yeah.
when they see the artist now, because you know, because the artist has aged substantially
Sure, sure.
over many decades. And what happens now is young people wind up shaming, you know,
Yeah,
people for getting old.
yeah.
And that's a prevalent thing on the internet, where young people shame older people for something that nobody can do about.
Sure.
And it's going to happen to the shamers too.
Yeah,
Which you know, I remember when I was young and I was in my, you know, early 20s and things like that. I was, you know, just like, you know, anyone else that's young now. I thought I was gonna stay that age for my whole life.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it really doesn't. It doesn't become part of your psyche at that time to think that you're going to get old. And
yeah, yeah.
I remember when I was in my you know, late teens, early 20s, and I would think about when I would reach my 40s, and I would go, oh my gosh, that's so far
Far
down the
away.
road. You know, oh my gosh, you know, that's forever down the road. Well, guess what? Now I have passed that
Yeah,
and almost doubled it. And so it's really kind of mind-boggling to see how young people will blame people for getting older.
sure, sure.
And it, to me, it is like the absolute most ridiculous thing. You know, it really just shows, you know, how, you know, young people still think the way that I used to think back
Sure.
then, but I would never have shamed a
No,
person for
no, no.
getting older.
I mean,
You know what I mean?
Gar,
How can how can you shame somebody for something that there's absolutely nothing you can do about?
And you got to remember, that's going to be you one day. And, I mean, the thing of it, Gar, is I'll tell you a funny story. I never really felt like I was old until maybe the age of 30. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm no longer in my 20s. And that was probably the hardest birthday, maybe, where I dealt with age. But as life goes on, it hasn't really affected me. I just like keep going on like you. And that's the thing when you do a show on classic TV shows, retro stuff, go back in this time machine that we created. I mean, this is our image of these people. This is how we will always think of them. And I'm sure you've seen when you go on YouTube and they have clips of what these people look like now. Oh, let's see the stars of Welcome Back Kotter, from then and now. Where you might see Gabe Kotter. He doesn't have his beautiful afro hair like he used to, but he looks how he does, and that's cool. The other thing I love about doing the show, like when we did Welcome Back Kotter last week, sometimes we come across things. This all almost happens in every episode, such as I'm going to give you the phrase "up your nose." Now, because of the popularity of that catchphrase, I found on YouTube that Gabe Kaplan had recorded one of these novelty songs called "Up Your Nose," and it's not that great of a song, but it's hilarious for what it is. And so that's part of the reason we have our Facebook page. When we have these discussions and I bring up this song "Up Your Nose," I want people to go on our Facebook page and be able to experience it like we did.
Well, and I just, I love revisiting, these things. It's just, uh, it's, I had no idea
Neither did I.
that reminiscing was going to be
Like this.
such a big thing to me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? I just love doing this show because I love reminiscing about all of these things. I love pointing out things about how things used to be back then and how things have changed over the years. And, it's just it's so I have no idea how to describe it, but it is so enjoyable to do.
And I think a big part of that is because how many times do we refer to as you just said, the good old days? I mean, like doing Welcome Back Kotter with Flintstones, almost every episode we've done, it's like I relive those times of my life. It's like I'm there seeing the movie or the TV show for the very first time.
Well, and that's another thing about doing the time machine. It also kind of adds color to a faded picture
Sure.
of how these people in these shows and all of these things that we bring up have paved the way for things to be the way that they are now.
Yeah, yeah.
We have people like the cast for Saturday Night Live to thank for all of the comedy that it spawned from that one TV show, because that one TV show spawned so much comedy. It's almost like that TV show was the nuclear bomb that exploded a whole bunch of comedy that came out of it. You've got Ghostbuster movies, you've got Superstar, you've got all of these
Blues
the
Brothers,
Conehead
Coneheads.
movies. You have all of these other things that spawn from a TV show that was iconic in itself.
Yeah.
But in actuality, that TV show was in the world of comedy was a nuclear explosion.
And I'm going to tell you something, Gar Borras. Saturday Night Live, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of like 3 episodes we've done so far where it ended up being a 3-part episode because, as you mentioned, it spawned so many careers, so much great comedy, but also it highlighted so many great musical acts that we even did an episode on the musical guests that came on the show. some of the breakout stars. So again, and when I got the idea to do Saturday Night Live, it was for all those reasons. And when as we're doing the show, I kind of realized that I was a much bigger fan of the show than maybe what I had originally thought.
I do that with almost all of these episodes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's true. Remember, the game shows when we were doing Family Feud, and we were, doing the episode, and I was talking about how I had, rediscovered
Covered
how
it.
funny
Yeah,
the show was.
yeah.
Things like that, that it just kind of takes something that the color is kind of faded and adds that color to it again.
Yeah, Family Feud is a great example because I was always a huge Richard Dawson fan, but then, like you said, I see all these great episodes on YouTube that people can go check out for free. I mean, and then you also discover, something like Family Feud. While we may have originated with Richard Dawson, you realize it is so much. The show itself is so much bigger than any one person because the show has continued on for years and years with different hosts. Some are more popular than others, but the show, very much something like the Tonight Show, kind of outlast everybody that's been a host.
Yes, yes, and there's so many examples of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of these stars in their careers have had to eat some humble pie because of that.
Sure, sure. Yeah.
They are the ones that carry the show.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, when all was said and done, we find out in the big picture that they were not the whole show, and they were not carrying the show, and the show was bigger than all the stars.
I mean, even Ray Combs, one of the hosts that originally replaced Richard Dawson, he didn't last very long on the show, and come to find out, sadly he ended up killing himself, and we got a little into that, and although that's not a happy thing to get into, I think it is part of the show's history, and it was important to kind of cover that. But like you see how he was angry and bitter, kind of, and you could kind of understand why. But like there was one episode apparently where he was showing how bitter he was towards maybe the producers, and the audience didn't really care for that.
Well, what happened to him, wound up happening to a lot of artists.
Sure.
That were, in 80s hair bands when the 80s, metamorphosized into the 90s.
Yeah.
Because it's really, like around 89, 90 that 80. I'd say it's really about 90, 91. So it's really weird how the actual turn of that decade actually turned out to be the actual turn of the drop in popularity of hair bands. So basically what happened to Ray Combs was happening to a lot of artists that were, just kind of their efforts were coming to fruition in the late 80s, and then all of a sudden it just got completely cut short. The ultimate example of that is the band Winger.
Sure.
They were not an early 80s phenomenon. They were a late 80s phenomenon. And they had major hits. They were structuring songs and making songs that were legitimate hit type songs and stuff like that. But what did they last? Maybe a couple of years, and then all of a sudden the floor just dropped from underneath.
And it was Beavis and Butthead that killed them.
Well, and it's that time period, because that's the exact same time period that it became popular to bash that. And the reality was that in the early 80s, like with anything, in the early 80s, it was a genuine rebellion thing.
Sure.
But by the time, it had lasted. This is a genre of music that stayed in popularity for a good 10 years,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah,
it started in 1980 with Quiet Riot and Mental Health,
sure,
and then it just went all the way to 1990. So that's a 10-year span of popularity of hair band music. But when it started in 1980, it was an original, and it was a genuine rebellion thing. And by the time it reached 1990, it was a formulated,
sure.
it had ran its course, and it's popular. It was time for it to stop
Yeah,
becoming
yeah,
popular. You know what I mean?
sure, sure.
It had run its course. And most genres don't last 10 years. Most genres last maybe about
Yeah,
4 to 5 years.
yeah, yeah.
And then that change occurs. And that has always been the cycle of music. Genres never go away. They just kind of fade in popularity and then kind of come back in a new form.
New
And
cycle.
heavy metal has done that too. It goes up in popularity and in a new form, and then it goes down in popularity, and then it goes back up in popularity in a new form. And that's how the cycles work. But the 1980s was a phenomenon, because that whole thing lasted 10 years, which is
Sure.
double what a
It's
genre usually lasts.
yeah, and again,
So,
yeah,
when you reach the 1990s, it was time, and it was no longer a rebellion thing. It was something that that had become redundant.
yeah, yeah. And Gar, before you wrap it up for today, another thing, it's going to be that time of year. I cannot believe we got 3 more months, and then it'll be a new year. The holidays are among us, and that's one of my favorite times of the year for many reasons, but also for the time machine, because we've done a lot of great holiday episodes. I mean, the very first one we did was It's a Wonderful Life, and I had to go there and say, not even knowing at the time, you have your little private joke about when you get excited, you start talking like Jimmy Stewart, but it I hadn't seen that film in years, and of course, in prepping to do that episode, I watched the film for first time in years, and it's still a great film.
Well, it's a tradition for me. It's even, for Halloween. Every Halloween, there's movies that I like to watch. One of my favorite movies to watch during Halloween is Burbs. It's a Tom Hanks movie that
Yeah,
was made way back in the 80s. That is so awesome. I love that movie. And then during Christmas, I have movies that are traditional. It's a Wonderful Life is every Christmas.
yeah,
And then Thanksgiving is Trains, Planes, and
yeah. We did
Automobiles.
a great episode on that, and it reminded me of just how great of a movie that was. And I remember a few days before we did the episode, they were showing the film again in theaters, and I went to see it just to kind of have that experience, and it was still just a great classic film. I know for Halloween last year we did the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, and Beetlejuice. Those were two fun ones, and like you and I have discussed, I'll let the cat out of the bag. Let people know this. This year for one of our Halloween shows, we're going to do. You and me discuss doing Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. So I'm looking forward to that.
Hey, oh my gosh, my sister and I, when we were children, every Halloween, before it was dark, on TV. I don't remember what station,
Yeah,
but it
yeah,
was every year that station would air Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and my sister and I would watch it. Just before we would go out to trick or treat, and it just became a tradition every year that we would watch that movie until whatever that station was decided that they no longer wanted to do that. It had basically ran its course,
yeah.
because they had actually done it for quite a few years in a row. But I was so disappointed when I was a kid when they stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ingrained in my life. It was part of my routine of doing Thanksgiving. And when they stopped, I was disappointed.
And people should check it out. We'll talk more about it when we do that episode in a few weeks. But Gar, we also did a great episode for on the original Frankenstein movie. And I will just say that we'll wrap it up on this. The original Frankenstein from 1931 is not Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, and that's what makes it such a great film.
Well, No, okay.
The
A
comedy
lot
factor,
of,
I should say.
because I was a child, during the time when those movies were being shown on TV, and what I'm talking about are the classics like Dracula,
Sure.
Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Mummy.
These are all the classics
Yeah.
of that time period. Well, I was a kid during that time. And, a lot of people don't know this, but during that time period, I used to go, into liquor stores because they always had the candy section.
Yeah.
And they used to have, baseball cards, football cards and stuff like that. But a lot of people don't know it. And I bought it when I was a kid, and I used to have these cards. They were a deck of cards, but they weren't a deck of cards that you played card games
Like
with. They were
collector's cards.
trading
Yeah.
cards, but they were the classic monsters from those movies.
Wow. Gar Borras, this has been
And
another
I
great.
used to have those cards back in those days. That's how special all of those classic horror creatures are to me, because there's a lot more to it than just watching the
Watching a
movies.
movie,
I
yeah.
even used to have the trading cards.
Wow, Gar Borras, you're taking me back, my friend. We're going to have to say goodbye. This has been another great episode. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Oh, good, brother.